Ferrari at breakfast. 0845 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC 973. This is Call Clegg on London's biggest conversation. LBC 97.3.
It's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 6th of January.
Channel 4 programme, Benefit Street, and the people that are in it.
I haven't seen it, Tony, so I can't comment. I mean, it's obviously provoked a lot of comment, and millions of people watched it. So I just can't comment on the programme. From what I've heard of the reactions, some people say, it's kind of, it's a sort of, it's painting an unfair picture. Other people saying it's lifting a lid on something that people haven't confronted before. Do you know what? I mean, I just think, like all of these things, the truth is probably somewhere in between, that there are lots of people who we support as a society through our welfare system, which we should. People who are vulnerable, people who need help, people who've got out of work and need help to get back into work. But what we've got to absolutely make sure, of course, is that that we reform welfare, as we are constantly, to make sure that you can't just make it a kind of way of life, and that it doesn't destroy the incentive to work. Work must always pay, and it must always be better to work than rely on benefits. If you're confronted with that choice.
I asked you that question because I heard a few days ago you said that the reform should really start at the top and work its way down, not at the bottom and work its way up. The reforms that the Tory government are bringing in regarding benefit reform. I think there should be a parallel programme made by Channel 4 called Greedy Street. Perhaps they should follow bankers around for a day, going to Annabelle's or White's, or some really top places they may. You mean
a Kensington Street full of tax dodgers?
Yeah. Why don't they do that?
I should hasten to add, to the residents of Kensington, I'm assuming that there is no such street in Kensington. But I know the point you're making, Tony. More generally, the point I was making, which was slightly different, which was that, as you know, the Conservatives have said that in the future, if they're to come into government after the next election, they would only ask people who are relying on working age benefits, or people of working age, to make further sacrifices to make the numbers add up. And the point I was making, which obviously you heard, Tony, was, well, what about why we're not asking people with much broader shoulders to make an ongoing contribution to the ongoing effort of balancing the books? I think we've got to spread the burden fairly. It's as simple as that.
It is a bit depressing, though, if it is true anywhere between 75 or 95% of one particular street with 99 houses are living on benefits, isn't it, Mr. Clegg? As in Benefit Street, as it's called.
Well, clearly you want to get people off relying on benefits and into work wherever you can, and that's why. And I think it's been a really significant shift that over the last few years we've seen, not least because of the reforms we've introduced as a coalition government, including, by the way, of course, raising the point at which you start paying income tax, so that when you start going back to work, even on low pay, you keep more of the money that you earn. So the incentive to work is greater and greater and greater. And look, there are a lot of people in work who, of course, also receive support, who find it difficult to make ends meet, but at least they're in work, and I think the fact that we've got more men and women in work now than ever before is a great tribute to millions of British people who've seen their way through these difficult times.
All right, Tony, thanks for your call.
David in St Albans.
Good morning. In view of the difficulties that many people have with their monthly pay running short by the end of the month, requiring expensive loans from payday loan companies, could you suggest that companies could possibly arrange for their staff to be paid on a weekly or maybe fortnightly basis, because modern salaries are paid straight into the bank anyway, so it shouldn't present any difficulties with sorting out the paperwork, should it?
So you're suggesting, what you're saying, David, so it's Nick Ferrari, by the way, is every company must be mandated to pay weekly? Is that what you're driving?
Well, it could be suggested as a voluntary thing, first of all, as a staff incentive.
But David, can I just... So I just understand, because I haven't heard this idea before. Can I just understand it? You're being paid, when you're being paid every month now.
Yes.
So, as the recipient of that, it's the same amount of money you're talking about. So you can choose, obviously, with those monthly payments to ration what you pay out every week so that it covers your needs during the month. I'm just why would paying the same amount of money in either 2 weekly or weekly instalments necessarily make that any easier?
Well, because the company would be doing the rationing, and don't forget everybody's paid in arrears; they're not paid in advance.
Yeah.
So the companies are in fact keeping your money for an extra, 3 weeks of your money.
Yeah.
They're keeping for a week long, several weeks longer.
Yeah.
So obviously it's in advance to the company to keep on to hang on to the money, but. If people are given their money on a weekly basis, they've only got to last a week, haven't they?
Yeah. Do you know what, David? I haven't heard this before. I suspect this is as much as anything else about how people sort of ration the money they receive. And I guess my knee-jerk response is that if people just splurge their money the moment they get it at the end of the month. For them then to sort of need having their pay spread out over weekly instalments, I wonder if you're the kind of person who's going to do that, you're probably going to find that you're going to be overstretched anyway.
Yeah. I mean, this is the point of conversation, Deputy Prime Minister, because Shelter this week, you may be aware, put out figures that suggested nearly 1 million people could have taken out a payday loan in the last year to help cover their rent or their mortgage costs. It does talk about how difficult the cost of living is, and of course also calls into question, but I understand legislation is on the way concerning the payday loan industry. There's something new on the way, I think in April, isn't there? There
are huge changes on the way, and we've announced those, and we'll be introducing them shortly to make sure that people can't face these extortionate rates from payday lenders, that there should be a limit to that proper checks need to be made before loans are made about whether they can be paid back and so on. Look, for people on low incomes facing high rents, facing high energy costs, these are difficult times. That's why we are introducing probably the biggest change in the income tax system we've seen in a generation or so that you can you earn your first £10,000 tax-free. I've said I want to see us go further at the next budget in a few weeks' time, a workers' bonus, a further £500 uplift in the allowance so you don't pay any tax on your first £10,500. That'd be another £100 off for millions of basic rate taxpayers. And of course, as we discussed earlier, we should make sure that the benefit system is not there to help people who don't need the help, but it is there to help people who really are vulnerable and need help to get by from week to week.
OK, let's move on to other subjects.
Graham in Croydon. Graham.
Good morning.
Hello.
I'd like to ask you, in what circumstances you'd consider ending the coalition early, after there's no need to go right through to May 2015?
Well, I think there is a need, to be honest, having said to the British people that we're going to work together for 5 years for many reasons, but the principal reason being in order to put the country, to start pointing the country in the right direction economically, given that when we came into power in May 2010, the economy really was teetering on the edge of a precipice. And I think it's important that we should see that through. And of course, one of the first things we did as a coalition government was to legislate, to put this beyond question, to say that the Parliament was going to last a full 5-year period. I think endless speculation, which we had in the past about when a general election is going to be held, is a government going to kind of fold and go to the country, I think has been quite damaging in the past. It actually increases uncertainty. It means that politicians play cat and mouse with the British people about when they're going to hold an election. I think the fact that we've got clarity and certainty that this Parliament will carry on till May 2015, got clarity and certainty from myself and the Prime Minister that whatever our differences, we continue to believe that it was right that we came together in the national interest, and that, painstaking though it is, the economy, for every day that the coalition continues, is a day that the economy gets stronger.
Quick response from you, Graham.
Yes, I have actually looked up the Fixed Term Parliament Act 2011, so you can see what I do in my spare time. And there is some wriggle room in there. The Prime Minister can alter the date by up to 2 months, and also the House of Commons can vote. So if the circumstances were right, and you mentioned economic circumstances, then it might be possible to do that. After all, we do have stability, which is, I think, a purpose at the time, but it's not the sole purpose, which is what you do with the stability. And also, a second point, very quickly, would be, how would you assess the risk that voters will see the Lib Dems and the Conservatives as one and the same thing, and it will decide that at the next election they simply have a straight vote between Labour and Conservative.
Well, I think what I will need to do, and something that I explain day in, day out, is that in my own view, actually one of the greatest risks now to the ongoing strength of the economic recovery is either a Conservative-only government, because I think the Conservatives have now entering into one of their familiar bouts of sort of ever more hyperbolic talk about Europe. They now are flirting openly with leaving the European Union altogether, which I think would be an act of economic suicide for the country, notwithstanding, of course, the need for Europe to reform and the European Union to be reformed. But yanking us out, I think, would be disastrous. And of course, the Labour Party, who still don't appear to have learnt the mistakes of what happened. What went so spectacularly wrong on their watch back in 2008. And I think the Liberal Democrats, there are some people who don't like the coalition, there's some people who don't like what things we've done, but I don't think very many people can dispute the fact that we've held our nerve, and that because we've done so, we've done the difficult spade work of creating or starting to create an economic recovery which is gaining momentum, and have tried to do that in the fairest way possible. Now, look, there's some people who may not like that, but I don't think very many people can somehow claim that the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives are identical. In fact, most days I read breathless predictions that we're spending too much time disagreeing with each other.
Graham, thank you for that. Email question come in from another Graham, actually Graham in Bushy. The report onto the conduct and behaviour of Lord Rennard over sexual harassment claims evidence against him was broadly credible, although there was less than a 50% chance that harassment charges could be proved. Why then should he not be expelled from the party, all privileges removed? Further, should he not apologise to the women who reported these claims, and what action are you going to take, asks Graham.
He should apologise, and it's not me just saying that. The QC, the independent QC, an eminent judge, looked into this. It was done entirely independently, and he, as you quite rightly just reminded us, he said that there wasn't, in his view, enough evidence to clear the threshold of what is in effect the criminal burden of proof in order for him to recommend action. But he felt there was, in his view, clear evidence that the women were speaking with credibility, that they should be believed, that they were subject to behaviour which was distressing, that Chris Rennard should reflect on his behaviour and he should apologise. And I think it is a matter of very real regret, to put it mildly, that so far at least he hasn't chosen to apologise. I have apologised on behalf of the party for the fact that I don't think, it's quite clear that we didn't respond to their appeals, if you like, early enough, that the procedures handling all of this were insufficient. We've taken a very unforgiving look, frankly, and it's been an unflattering picture that's emerged of a party that didn't have the right procedures, didn't provide sufficient protection to these women. We've changed them dramatically, and I happen to think that the point that is it Graham? Did you say? That Graham's made about the sort of threshold of proof that needs to be cleared in these inquiries does need to be looked at again, and that's why I've asked Tim Farron, who's the president of the party, to do just that. And
it's a party with a leader who should have asked more questions, apparently.
I think we should I think we should all ask. Yes,
you failed on your watch here.
I think we should all have asked more questions. I've said that.
You failed on your watch here, Mr. Clegg. Did you as leader?
Well, as I said, I think we should all have asked more questions. Questions were asked, but they were not pursued. Things were not taken up as formally as they should have been. And if you really want the full gory details of that, look at the report that I commissioned, again independently, from Helena Morrissey, who, as I say, was totally uncompromising in her view that whatever people's intentions were, the procedures were simply not there in order to respond to and properly look into the claims when they first surfaced. So we deserve, and you're absolutely right. The buck stops with me, and I've said very clearly.
So it was a failure on your part.
Well, I've said very clearly there are a number of.
You don't like the F word, do you?
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to use my own words, and I think the party as a whole, and myself as leader, we've got to take responsibility for that, failed to respond to the concerns first raised. We then looked very, very closely at the way in which we handle these things, which wasn't properly organised. The rules, the procedures, and all the rest of it were basically lacking, and in some cases just absent. We've now filled all of that or addressing all of that by implementing the recommendations of the Morrissey report. I think the report from the QC, published yesterday, has revealed, if you like, that there is further work to do, because the burden of proof that needs to be met when a report is launched surrounding cases like this is a very high burden of proof. And I think it just doesn't, for me, it's sort of, in this case, what the QC has said is he should apologise. The witnesses were credible. He needs to reflect on his behaviour, but the proof is not sufficient to take action. And I think we do need to reconsider that as a party, and that's what we will now do.
Fourth and final time, not a failure then?
I think it's a failure of everybody concerned, clearly, and
including the leader.
Well, you don't. Of course, you don't apologise unless you think that you take personal responsibility. Of course, I do as leader. I've never ever shirked my own responsibility as leader of a party that I think we have failed to respond to the claims made by the women when they were first made many years ago.
How much would you like Lord Rennard to leave the party?
I want him above all this morning to do the decent thing as asked for by the QC, who's looked at this very meticulously, very fairly, very reasonably. Who said, "Look, you just owe an apology."
And if he doesn't, Nick Clegg?
Well, at the end of the day, I can't. I'm the leader of a political party. There's some things I can do directly. There are some things that I can't.
Why can't you boot him out?
Oh, because I can't. Because you have something called due process, which you have in every organisation. I suspect you have it in this organisation.
Sure.
Every organisation, every party.
If I had a colleague who was asked to apologise and he or she didn't, I would probably move to a position that I didn't want to work with them. Well, this man thinks he's going to write your manifesto.
He's not. He's not going to play a role in my general election campaign next year. And I made that very clear. So, what I can do as leader in this case is say that, echo and repeat what the QC has said himself, that he should apologise. But at the end of the day, given that the standard of proof which we presently have in our rules mean that no action can be taken, and you have to respect the outcome of that report, you have to respect the rules as they are at the moment, even though we're going to review them, I nonetheless think it is really important that he does the decent thing and apologises to these women, because as I said before, they have been let down, they have been failed, and they are owed an apology.
So if he's not going to write the manifesto, then what is he going to do?
Well, he's a member of the Liberal Democrats. He's a member of the House of Lords. But he, as
he's
I say,
probably listening. Why don't you talk to him now? Tell him to apologise.
I have done. I've said repeatedly, and not only have I apologised as leader of the party to the women, both personally and publicly. I just think, when it is so obvious that these women were subject to behaviour which caused them distress, and you look, I have a rather old-fashioned view that everybody should seek to sort of treat each other with respect, but people in positions of authority have a special responsibility to treat people in an appropriate way, and not treat people in an offensive or inappropriate manner.
And just lastly on this, the two women at the heart of the story, you're probably aware, one told Channel 4 News yesterday, "My advice to Nick Clegg would be kick the guy out," referring to Lord Rennard, and the other victim saying, "Faced with the opportunity to take strong action, the Liberal Democrats have once more opted for cowardice."
Well, I can only explain that in my party, as in any party, however strongly you feel about things, everybody has to be treated in the same way when these disciplinary procedures happen. You can't just have kangaroo courts, can you? And our rules currently mean that you have to have a criminal burden of proof before disciplinary action can be taken. Now, you can have an argument, which is a perfectly legitimate one, about actually whether that burden, that threshold, should be set lower, and that's precisely what we're going to look at.
It must be frustrating for you, isn't it?
Well, of course it is frustrating for me, where I think that the women have been wronged, where they've been let down by the party, where they are owed an apology, and they're not being given the apology which I think they rightly deserve. I cannot be clearer than that. At the end of the day, if someone is not prepared to do the decent thing and apologise to people, I can't frog march them to do so, but I would nonetheless appeal to their basic decency to do it.
Should we move to other calls? Mr. Clegg.
Yep. Ahmed in New Malden. Ahmed.
Good morning, Mr. Clegg. Yesterday I was in the public gallery of the House of Commons
you lucky
and
man.
listening to the banking debate about the motion the Labour Party had put forward. Now, I don't know what the coalition and in particular your party, what action they intend to take to stop this, I think, scandalously disgraceful high salary and these, out of proportion bonuses for the bankers. It's not bankers' fault, it's the bank culture.
Yeah.
Because, this is a kick in the teeth of ordinary hard-working people who are probably getting for their hard
but
work.
Can I just do something which I know we try and avoid in the show? I'm afraid I'm just going to be a little bit partisan.
All right.
Because to be lectured by the Labour Party about how to reform our banks is like being lectured about firefighting by an arsonist. I mean, these are the people who presided over the biggest, most disastrous collapse in our banking system in living memory because they willfully ignored warnings, by the way, from us. I remember week in, week out, Liberal Democrats getting up in the House of Commons and saying to the people who are now piously saying you've got to do something to the banks, and we were saying to them week in, week out, this is going to end in tears. You've got to regulate the banks better. And it was summarily dismissed. The Labour Party had actually launched, do you remember, famously, a prawn cocktail charm offensive where they went around the City of London sucking up to the banks rather than actually regulating the problem. And now these people, it's just, I mean, it's almost laughable. Think that they have a right to somehow lecture us. What have we done? We've actually rescued the banking system. We have, as you know, we've divided off the kind of freewheeling investment banking system from the high street banking system upon which ordinary people depend. After the Vickers report, we have created new regulators. We've implemented very tough new rules on bonuses and pay. We've put a cap on cash bonuses of £2,000, which will remain. As the Prime Minister quite rightly said yesterday, in the banks that we own, as majority shareholders like RBS, we're not going to consent to anything which would just simply see a return to the bad old days. So we have taken a huge amount of action, and we will continue to do so in the name of the British public, who rightly deserve to see restraint amongst bankers, and by the way, particularly restraint in bankers in banks like RBS, which are not normal banks, because they've basically been put on a life support system paid for by you, Ahmed, and all other taxpayers.
Well, yeah.
So they can't simply be regarded like any other commercial bank.
Let's bring Ahmed back into it.
Mr. Clegg, do you think the bankers have learned anything since 2008? I think they're carrying on with the same culture.
I think that, do you know what? I think we, as a government, have learnt the mistakes from our predecessors. I think that's why we've put in place much, much tougher rules on the way in which bankers are remunerated. I think it is now nigh impossible for bankers to do what they did under Labour, which is pay themselves monumental bonuses based on doing really daft, risky things. That's the key thing. I think simply sort of abolishing bonuses is not the answer. It's the key thing is that pay should only be linked to activity which is safe and productive, not risky and stupid. That's the big difference. That's what we've introduced. And frankly, I can almost admire the chutzpah that says that these people who created this monumental mess in the first place should now go around piously telling people how to clear it up.
I'll allow you one more point, Ahmed. I can hear you, but we have so many calls. Just briefly, if you could, Ahmed, a final point. Ahmed.
Well, I just want to say that, in the attendance in the chamber was not very much. I would have thought the banking issue debate would attract.
Yeah, but I mean that Ahmed, that's because in the weird and wonderful world of Westminster, you have these things called opposition day debates, where the opposition party of the day basically just use debates to constantly score sort of cheap and certainly in this case wholly incredible political points off the government. And so it's not about legislation being passed. And in this case, I think most people just stayed away because they just thought it was verging on the bizarre. The Labour Party thought they had anything to teach anyone about how to regulate the banks, since they are single-handedly responsible for the biggest collapse in our banking system in the post-war period.
We move on to other calls.
So, we have a Zach in Richmond Park. I have a feeling. Hello, Zach.
Morning, Nick.
This is the Zach, is it?
Good morning, Mr. Goldsmith. This is Zach Goldsmith, Tory MP, of course, in Richmond Park. Zach, you're through to the Deputy Prime Minister. Go ahead, Mr. Goldsmith.
Thank you very much.
It'll be either recall or Heathrow. Which one is it, Zach, today?
It is not. Well, you've guessed it half correct. It is Heathrow.
Right.
The reason I'm calling is because there is. I know the long-standing position the Lib Dems have taken on in relation to Heathrow, and it's been widely appreciated in South West London. I accept that. However, there is a lot of confusion now about the Lib Dem position. On the one hand, the party says that it rules out Heathrow expansion, but on the other hand, it supports the Airport Commission, which heavily leans towards expansion. So I would appreciate, and I'm sure your listeners would appreciate it, if you could categorically rule out expansion of Heathrow, whatever the election outcome, whatever the conclusion of the review, or at least to clarify your position.
Yeah, sure. The reason we've always ruled out Heathrow Expansions Act, which I'm assuming is the same reason that you have, is because of the environmental impacts, because of the impact on air pollution, on noise pollution, particularly people such as your constituents living under the flight path. And because what I mean is, why I preface it like that, Zach, is because I assume you take very strong positions for a reason. It's not you don't just do it sort of for the hell of it. That is the reason. That is the reason we've always been such staunch opponents of Heathrow expansion. So clearly, any suggestion which leads to expansion of Heathrow, which increases the existing levels of air pollution and noise pollution, entirely consistent with what we've said for years, is something we will reject. I guess the bit where you and I differ is, am I therefore going to sort of, not read the Howard Davies report? He said that there's this complex debate about whether you need a hub or not, whether, he's actually floated in his interim report, I'm sure you've read it, this quite interesting idea that says that far from Heathrow being the place which we should look at, we should be looking at Gatwick if the real increase in aviation in the future is what they call point-to-point air transport. So I think, I'm a person who tries to be led by evidence. I will look at it, but I can't be less... I don't think I can be any more unambiguous by saying, the reason we've always opposed Heathrow expansion is because of the effect on the environment, on air pollution, noise pollution. Anything that does that in a bad way is something we're clearly going to reject.
I'll allow you one quick rejoinder, because it is meant to be regular listeners, Zach, and you have the benefit.
Come on, Zach, let the public have a say, Zach.
Just brief response from you, Zach Goldsmith.
The beauty of this programme is that you can come back. You can't in Parliament. But look, where the confusion lies, I think, is that the review has only one option, which doesn't involve Heathrow expansion. So if you accept the review, I don't see how you can do that at the same time as rejecting all of the
I haven't said I accept
what's the point of the review?
Well, I haven't said I accept the review. The review hasn't been concluded, so it's very difficult to sort of accept or reject something which hasn't been concluded. But look, I've given you my views. I hope that's as clear as it can be. I believe it is.
A question from me, if I may. I've saved my question towards the end. Still a couple more questions to come from listeners. I don't know if you've had sight of a poll done by the Sun newspaper today in conjunction with YouGov, which shows that the Conservatives are on course to finish outside the two top parties in a nationwide election that would be won by the Labour Party. UKIP would come in second, and if you move the numbers to this May's European Parliament election, you won't have an MEP left standing.
Well, look, I mean, the first thing I say is, look, do I think the European elections are going to be tough for the Liberal Democrats? Yes. I mean, I'm not going to be silly about this, because clearly the circumstances in which we fought them last time are quite...
There's tough, Mr. Clegg.
Yeah, well, hang on. Then
you've had sight of the Sun.
Yes, I have. But I mean, I've lost count of the number of polls that A, vary wildly one to the other, and B, make wildly different predictions, almost none of which ever actually turn out to be the case. So all I would say is I know it sounds very old-fashioned, and it's what all politicians say. It so happens to have the virtue of truth, which is let's wait and see what the people say rather than what pollsters say. That is not to deny that I think that we've got a real uphill struggle. But do you know what? I mean, I think the more important and perhaps interesting point is that given those kind of predictions, you might have thought that what I'm going to conclude is, let's not talk about Europe too much because making the case for Britain's continued role of Europe is unpopular and so on. I'm actually going to do exactly the reverse, because do you know what? I really genuinely think we're now getting to a point in the debate where you've got this kind of unholy bidding war between the Conservative Party and UKIP, who can sound more breathless in their condemnation of all things European, and before you know it, this country will find itself outside the European Union. I think that means we would be less relevant and powerful in the world. We would wield less influence around the world, but crucially, you'd have fewer people in work, because being in Europe at the end of the day means being in work, and I'm not going to stand idly by while people play ever more silly political games and jeopardise millions of jobs in this country. So you know what? Whatever the pollsters say, we're going to remain the party of in, because I think being in Europe means being in work.
And I just leave you, before the final call, the first paragraph of the Sun leader column. There's only one crumb of comfort for David Cameron from our devastating poll on the Euro elections. He's not Nick Clegg.
Well, the Sun can speak for itself. It always does.
Final call for today.
Kim in Sevenoaks.
Good morning, Nick and Nick.
Hello.
Hello, Kim.
Hiya. Do you approve of MPs using £10,000 of the taxpayers' money for acting lessons? And what are you going to do about it?
This is the report that George Osborne and some other coalition ministers apparently spent £10,000 on taxpayers' money on acting lessons from one of Britain's most exclusive drama schools. This has been in the Huffington Post and the Daily Mail. Apparently politicians hope to use acting techniques in the hope of turning prosaic monologues into dazzling oratorical performances, and they've used RADA to give them acting and voice tuition.
Well,
Nick Clegg.
Kim, I've never heard of this before. It's not something
I'm sorry, I can't believe that you're an MP and you've never heard of this before. I believe that the MPs that have used this
Kim,
money
can I try and give you an answer?
back to the system.
Kim, can I just try and give you an answer?
Go ahead.
It is just not true that the government is using your money, taxpayers' money, to pay for cabinet ministers to take acting lessons. It is not true. It is something I've never heard of before. It's not something I've done. It's just I've no idea whether individual politicians have taken these lessons. But of course, there's no way that the government, and certainly no government of which I'm a deputy prime minister, is going to use taxpayers' money to send cabinet ministers to acting lessons.
They also use the money for their portraits as well. That money should be going back into the emergency services, not into MPs' pockets.
That's £250,000 worth of pictures for people such as Diane Abbott and Ken Clarke.
Yeah, but that's not a government thing. That's the Parliament. But Parliament for generations, and if you go to Parliament, I mean, there are beautiful paintings of Gladstone and Disraeli. Not to mention latter-day leaders like Diane Abbott and Ian Duncan Smith and David Cameron and so on. I mean, the Parliament has for centuries had a historical tradition of having paintings done of people who've made a contribution to Parliament.
And the acting classes.
I have no idea.
According to this report, government credit card records, the Treasury last year paid for 2 sets of RADA courses, £1,500 in October, £1,500 in February. The Department of Health has spent more than £3,500 for 3 courses in 2012. Well, it goes on.
Kim, I'll look into it.
But if it is true, Mr. Clegg, how would you react?
Well, pretty poorly, because I don't think we should be spending... On that, I agree with Kim. Of course, we shouldn't be spending taxpayers' money giving acting classes to cabinet ministers. But look, I sit around the cabinet table every... I've never heard this before. I certainly have not had taxpayers' money spent on a RADA acting course.
I'm not saying you, but all these MPs that have had this money, or cabinet ministers, they should pay the money back.
Yeah.
So this money can be used where it's needed in an emergency.
Well, let's agree to... I think
sure,
we need to...
I hear what you say, Ken. I know you obviously feel very strongly about
forcefully, this. And the Deputy Prime Minister, I think we need to agree to revisit this next week for Call Clegg. Just before I let you, have you ever paid for any form of tuition?
Tuition?
Yes, because you do seem to do very well broadcasting on the television and the radio. Have you ever had any coaching?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for instance, in the run-up to the leaders' debates...
Did you?
Yeah.
What does it give you?
But I mean, I pay for that. Well, my party pays for it. It's not taxpayers.
What does it give you? Politicians seem to be very able to stand up and talk for themselves anyway. Why would they need RADA or any extra coaching?
Some do. I mean, look, I, to be honest, at the end of the day, I think my view is at the end of the day, the best thing you can do is try and speak naturally and as a human being. And if you can do that, then generally... But look, I mean, of course I'll look into what Kim says, but the idea that you need RADA acting classes, I mean, that is as laughable as Kim finds it outrageous.
And your money was well spent, because we always enjoy Call Clegg with LBC 97.3 and the Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, which is here, same place, same time next week.
I think it might be a different day next week. But,
is it? How exciting.
I think for various reasons I might need to do it on Wednesday.
Security reasons, yes, we might be doing it on a different way. We'll tell the listeners. Nick Clegg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're listening to LBC News is next.
Nick Clegg's admitted to LBC 97.3 he failed when it came to protecting women within the party who complained of sexual harassment. It follows an investigation into